Unit 7, first lesson here, lesson 1, positive and negative numbers. Let's explore how we can represent temperatures and elevations. Today's I can explain what 0, positive numbers, and negative numbers mean in the context of temperature and elevation. I can use positive and negative numbers to describe temperature and elevation, and I know what positive and negative numbers are. So this is the first lesson in this unit, so make sure that you've got Unit 7 that we're talking about numbers. We're looking at what are called rational numbers, actually. You have your ICANS, today's date, and you're ready to move on. Okay, so let's see what you notice with these two things from Memphis, Tennessee, and Bangor, Maine. So in Fahrenheit, you can see that Bangor, Maine is much colder. It's much further north than Memphis, Tennessee is. But if you look here at the Celsius, what happens? Yeah, remember that 0 or 32 degrees is equal to 0 in Celsius. So the fact that we're at 17 degrees, negative 17 degrees, just means that we are much colder than 32 degrees. And so while this is still a cold temperature, we can see that these negative numbers indicate an even colder temperature. All right, we're going to talk about above and below 0. We're going to explore that much further here. All right, so on a thermometer here, if we're going to show 7 degrees Celsius in the morning, that's where we're at right now, okay? Later in the day, the temperature has increased 4 degrees. We can represent that change over here on the number line, right? So if it was 7 degrees, it increases 4 degrees. Pretty easy. It's 11 degrees Celsius, right? Okay. All right, so we're going to look at these number lines and do some things with the numbers here and kind of look at the change and represent them. So at noon, I'll do on the first one here, it was 5 degrees Celsius. Okay. And by late afternoon, it had risen 6 degrees. So if we start off with 5 degrees, that means that we're going to go up, up 6 degrees because it says 6 degrees, which means it's 11 degrees Celsius, right? What about this next one? Temperature was 8 degrees Celsius at midnight. And it has risen 6 degrees Celsius. So what is the temperature now? So if it's gone up 6 to, oh wait, I'm sorry, I misread that. It says it dropped 12 degrees. Okay, so if it was 8, we've got to go down 12 degrees. So 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And we still need to go a few more, right? So 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So what's the temperature here? Well, you can see we are 4 places less than 0. So we're at a negative 4 degrees Celsius. What about this last one? Water freezes at 0, but freezing temperature can be lowered by adding salt to the water. Student discovered that adding half a cup of salt to a gallon of water lowers its freezing temperature by 7 degrees. What's the freezing temperature of a gallon of salt water? Well, if water freezes at 0 And now that the freezing point is now 7 degrees colder, what's the temperature? Yeah, it's negative 7 degrees Celsius. So the negative is just talking about how we go on the other side of 0. It's a little bit different to think about, but it's certainly something we can work our way through. So we named the temperature by the Celsius, but then any of the numbers that were above 0, we just said the number, right? When it got to be below 0, that's when we added the word negative to it. The numbers that are less than 0, do they make sense? Well, yeah, if we think of 0 as being where water freezes, it can obviously get colder than that because there are materials that you can keep colder than that. So it does make that 0 numbers that are less than 0 are possible. Let's get down some terms in our notebook. So a negative number is a number that is less than 0. So on a horizontal number line, that's going to be anything to the left. And it just counts the same as you would to the right for positive numbers, except that now each step that you go to the left is one smaller than the previous. And even though the digit's bigger, it's kind of like a little bit like, doesn't it remind you a little bit of the further you move to the right on decimals, the lower the value it is? Doesn't it kind of give you that kind of thing, that now that or like with fractions especially, like if I have 1/10, 1/100th is a smaller fraction even though it's got a larger number here. It does have kind of a similar feel that for whatever number you have negative, it actually is worth less than the number that's smaller than it. So -7 is worth less than -6 or -5. And a positive number is any number at all greater than 0. So fractions that we've talked about, pretty much everything you've done to this point in school has been a positive number. Now we're starting to look at that, how we can get something smaller than 0 and how negative number works. And the number line for both this one and the previous one might be good for you to help out. Like just have a number line and just put on one side of it an arrow pointing up and put that those are positive, and put a negative, or put an arrow going the opposite direction and just call it negative. It would help. All right, let's take a look at some high and some low places. All right, so here's elevation of some various cities. What does this mean? Well, 0, when we talk about elevation is the height of a place compared to the ocean. The ocean is considered at 0. So Miami, Florida is actually considered at what we would term as sea level. So Denver, Colorado is in the Rocky Mountains. So it's called the Mile High City for a reason, because it is a mile into the air. We talk about Harrisburg, Pennsylvania is 320 feet in elevation. Bethel, Indiana, 1,211 feet. New York City is only 33 feet above sea level. What's going on here? What does this mean? Yeah, with Coachella, California, and Death Valley, California, both of those actually, where they're at and how that land is actually lower than sea level. So if it was closer to the sea, these would be definitely underwater. But since they're far enough inland and that there's, a coastal area that is at least at sea level or higher, these places actually exist below what would be sea level, or what would the 0 of sea level that would keep them from being underwater, or would actually make them underwater if they were at the coast. All right, so Coachella is negative 22 feet elevation. So which of these would have a higher elevation than Coachella, California? Remember that Coachella is negative 22 feet. So which ones would have higher? Okay, so 11 would have higher, wouldn't it? Because negative 11, if we look at a number line, is going to come closer to 0 than negative 22. So it is going to be higher than Coachella. What about 35, negative 35? Again, remember that with negative numbers, the bigger these are, the less the value they have. So this one would not be higher than negative 22 feet, because that would actually come further down here, right? What about 4 feet? Oh yeah, that's a positive number. What about negative 8 feet? Again, it's going to be to the right of negative 22, so it definitely is too. And what about 0? Yeah, 0 is kind of the basis point for all these figuring out, so it is definitely above. So really only the negative 35 feet is going to be lower in elevation than any of these others. Let's take a look at these. I think this is kind of neat to look at. So up here we've got mountains, and then in the ocean we've got some trenches that go pretty deep. So which point in the ocean is the lowest? Yeah, Marianas Trench. That is the lowest point in the entire world. It is over 2 miles below sea level. Oh, I'm sorry, that's in meters. So that's what, 11 kilometers below sea level? That's way more than 2 miles. I forgot. Sorry, I was thinking that was feet up here. So since it's 11,000 meters, that's 11 kilometers below sea level. Which of the mountains are the highest? Yeah, Mount Everest is the highest at 8,848 meters above sea level. So if we plotted these on a vertical number line, what's 0 going to represent? Yeah, that's sea level, right? So sea level is the 0 point where we kind of consider the base level. And then when you're talking about with the mountains, mountains are going to be positive numbers because they are taller than sea level. And the trenches that are in the ocean, deep within the ocean, are going to be negative numbers compared to 0 because they are below the surface of the ocean. Which is farthest from the sea level, the deepest point in the ocean or the highest mountain? Yeah, Marianas Trench is deeper than the highest point, Mount Everest, because this number is 11,000 away from 0. While this number is still, it's impressive, 8,848. It's not nearly the same distance as that negative 11,000 is. That's just so much further. So what was the 0 for temperature? Yeah, with Celsius, we're talking about 0 being the point that water freezes. Okay, and what about an elevation? Yep, that's, again, what we're talking about with sea level. Positive numbers in both of those are greater than 0. So in temperature, you're talking about warmer than freezing point for water. And for elevation, you're talking about above ocean. Same thing with negatives. It's the opposite. We're talking about colder temperatures than 0, freezing point, and elevations that are below sea level. All right, we are almost at the point, so I'm going to have to stop there. Hey, thanks for watching. Enjoy.